Welcome in, Scolders. What's going on, guys? Good to have you back. We got Tom, Pat, and myself, Kevin, here to break down all things Minnesota sports, all things interesting in the wonderful world of X and Twitter. Get you guys caught up to speed on our Minnesota Vikings, what we're doing this offseason, some NFL tidbits, a lot of things happening. It's been a fun offseason. I mean, we've been talking, and I think you guys are probably pretty excited for what's to come. I know I am. We got the NFL draft, 2 weeks away from this Thursday already?
Yeah.
Or is it
Yeah.
2 weeks?
2.
I just wanted to be here because I can't listen to another Michael Penix, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy. Oh, can we convince ourselves to Spencer Rattler conversation?
I draw the line at Spencer Rattler. I am not convincing myself into Spencer Rattler.
Or
It's
that
not gonna
Tulane guy's pretty good.
Hey, if you wanna take him as take a second quarterback, that's fine with me. That worked out for Washington a few years ago when they took RG3 and then Kirk later. But
I
let's,
was gonna ask, that'd be a fun trivia question. Has any team done that since Kirk and RG3? Taking 2 quarterbacks in the same draft? I feel like there is 1, maybe 2, but it would have been like a late round. So I don't know if that really qualifies.
What year was Luck? Was that 'cause
12.
didn't two? Okay, so that was
Same
Brissett?
year as RG3.
it was so same year, but I think they took, and I don't remember who it was, but I think it was didn't they take Mr. Irrelevant was another quarterback?
Was it from Iowa? Was it
It
wasn't
might have
Ricky
been, I don't-
Stanzi, right?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't wanna get us down that rabbit hole, but
Yeah.
it's just an interesting thing to think of. I mean, I'd be all for it. I don't think we really have the draft capital to really go swinging for multiple quarterbacks, at least with what we currently
I think we've
have,
got
but
later on, we've got what, 2 4th rounds, a 5th, 2 6th, and a 7th. We've got some draft
yeah, but
capital
if we
back
get
there.
if Quasey's right there and he's like, "I'm moving up to 4, this is our guy." We don't want him to take a second quarterback.
Why?
Selfishly, maybe, but no, because he's our guy. Why would you put any doubt in that guy's mind?
I mean, if
It's
you're
a
trading up to get
psychological
JJ
game.
McCarthy, I don't. If they're a top 5 pick, they better be sure about themselves enough to be able to handle a 150th or 200th pick. I mean, I suppose you can look at Brock Purdy and say, "Oh, look, he took Trey Lance's job, and maybe Trey Lance should have been a little bit more worried." But I don't know if that guy's worrying about the guy taken in the 5th or 6th round, then you got some issues right there.
Yeah, I guess 5th or 6th is different than a 4th in my mind, but
So you guys are just bypassing the Jaron Hall era, then not having any faith in last year's quarterback pick.
oh man, wasn't there another article that was? People are so bored these days. Kind of what I want to talk about is just this time that we have to kill, whether
Yeah.
it's NFL draft talk or just like somebody was saying that Jaron Hall. No, it was Josh Dobbs. Dobbs was like, yeah, they might have their future quarterback already on the roster. I don't know if that's a quote that he said, but that's what the article read was.
Yeah,
I thought it
saw
was
that.
like,
I saw that headline.
I was like, people are so bored. You're really writing an article about an interview that Josh Dobbs had about our third string quarterback.
I mean, I like Jaron Hall. I don't think he's the future. I think he could develop into a Taylor Heineke type of quarterback, a Case Keenum type of quarterback who can, give you a spot start here and there and maybe win you a game by running around or creating a little bit of magic.
I think he's more
he's
of
the
a
future.
David Blau comp. I mean, doesn't really have the arm talent, but can move around in the pocket, make some plays. Little guy.
We're
You know.
talking about the board season, how dead things are, and now we're evaluating Jaron Hall, who there's what a 95% chance he's not even on the roster next year, assuming we get our quarterback. So I think we are
He'll be on the
direct-
roster.
You think so?
I think he's a guaranteed spot. Yeah, we can carry 3 quarterbacks. They're gonna be
Well-
it'll be Darnold, it'll be whatever rookie quarterback, and it'll be Jaron Hall.
Well, here's another wrench I'm going to throw in your system. Speaking of off-season news that we might get to, Sean Mannion is now the quarterback coach just across the border in Green Bay.
So Kirk's
Not
going
only
to
is he gonna not Kirk, not only is he gonna steal all of our intel from our quarterback room, he's gonna steal part of that intel and either Nick Mullins if he doesn't make the team, or he's gonna take Jaren Hall from us if we let him ride on that practice squad.
I mean, if we're debating between Nick Mullins and Jaren Hall, don't we have to go with Jaren Hall?
I, I like Nick Mullins. He won us a couple games, right?
I'm a Nicky
No,
Nukes
did he
fan.
win us? How many
See,
games did Nick Mullins win us? 2?
I think
Not
the
enough.
problem is if we're even contemplating Nick Mullins starting any games, the season is lost regardless. And at that point, we're just hoping for a JJ2K season, and Nick Mullins gives us a very solid chance at that opportunity.
Nick
Yeah.
Mullins won't even get that opportunity to start, though. I mean, you'd have to have an injury to whatever rookie quarterback we draft and an injury
And
to Sam Darnold.
Very
So
true.
I think what you have to do is you take that project quarterback in Jaren Hall and continue to develop him, as a practice squad third string guy.
I just
Instead
think
of
the
instead of what you have with Nick Mullins.
I think of the worst case scenario, Sam's knee goes out, training camp. Then we got a rookie. We're not going to want to throw him into the fire. KOC doesn't want that for the development. Then we're just going to be stuck with Jaren Hall or Nick Mullins for the whole season because we're just going to be stuck.
Yeah,
Give it to
Speaking of
Aaron
that-
Jones 90 times a game.
Speaking of that, are you guys in the camp of you got to sit the guy for a year? Is it dependent on who the guy is? Is it dependent on where they're picked? I'm just curious. 'Cause I think we've seen varying success of that, obviously with Pat Mahomes, but then we've seen a lot of guys come in right away and have some immediate success as well.
I can go either way. I mean, obviously, you look at Green Bay, you look at Pat Mahomes, they've done it pretty well. I would like to do it like that. However, I think the Vikings are set up pretty well for a rookie quarterback to succeed right away. I mean, maybe not CJ Stroud, but I think they could be a pretty solid starter. I don't think it's going to wreck a rookie quarterback if they start, just because you've got, as much as we bitch about our offensive line, it's not the worst. It's pretty solid. You've got 2 great tackles, and the interior O line is okay. You've got great receivers. You've got a great tight end, and then a defense that's improving. So I think the Vikings are set up for, if they needed to, or if they wanted to, they can, throw whoever out there and they'll be okay. Ideally, I think I would sit in the camp with let them wait a year. But I think
if we
they've
get
got
Michael
the
Penix,
system. And
Michael Penix at 11, let him ride.
I mean, I think they have to beat out Sam Darnold. One thing. Even if they trade up to 3 and get Drake May, he has to look better than Sam Darnold in preseason and training camp.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way with Tom. I just think depends on the case by case scenario. I mean, also look at history though. Like it does help them more than it hurts them to at least sit a couple games. I would say half a year would be awesome. I mean, can we afford to do that? Maybe, depending on how Darnold looks. But if Darnold looks good, sure.
I mean,
nothing. It's a win-win.
Look at what Kevin O'Connell was able to do with Josh Dobbs, though, in his first 2 starts without knowing the playbook, not knowing any players.
Yeah.
Literally just telling him, okay, look here, throw here, here's your protection, these are the routes. He could do that with a rookie quarterback for a handful of games too, until he gets into a more comfortable area.
I've heard his offense is very complex for especially a rookie to come in and learn. So, it was pretty impressive for Jaren Hall to learn it by that point in the season and at least prepare like he was going to come out there and do that before he got knocked out.
But, before the games start, you do have 3 months of learning that playbook and stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, if it's Drake May, like I want it to be, because we all have our guys that we want. I'd feel comfortable with him going out there, but obviously we don't know anything, so we want to let the whole offseason play out, mini camp, OTAs, training camp. If he looks like the part, sure, go ahead. If there's any trepidation, let him sit.
do we have our guys? Do you guys have not only a quarterback that you want the most, but what draft scenario are you guys hoping for the most in within reason and realistic?
So you're saying you can't get up and get Caleb Williams at number 1 overall, because that
I'm
would be my
saying
ideal situation.
I'm saying you could, but you have to trade 11,
JJ.
23, JJ, 2025, 2026.
Yeah. So I have right now 3 guys who I realistically think could end up being Vikings, and that's not including Caleb, unfortunately. JJ has made his way up there really high for me. I'd say right up there with Jaden and Drake May. I though am it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because I think right now I've convinced myself that I would be okay with any of those 3 guys, assuming that is the guy who KFC and Kwesi identify as the guy who will elevate this franchise for the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm in team trade up mode right now and making that happen regardless of the price. That 2025 first, which has been floated around a lot, that is heavily rumored to need to be involved in getting up to 3. And now I'm even seeing 4 and 5, really does scare me, knowing that there are other holes on this roster. But I think that if you nail your pick, and again, that's assuming that we nail that pick, and Tom, you alluded to this earlier, but the system and the setup that the Vikings currently have is worlds better than just about anybody else in the league. Like, as far as systems go, obviously Chicago has 2 really good receivers now, and they have some infrastructure. But if I'm one of those top 4 guys, I am really, really praying that I land in Minnesota.
So, assuming we can't get into the top 3, and like you said, that 4 and 5 want 2025 and change as well. Do you think that we just end up sitting at 11, and do you see a team like the Giants taking quarterback? Because if the Giants don't take a quarterback at 6, there could be, JJ McCarthy or Drake May that starts to slide a little closer to 11. That might make it a little bit more easy to move up. But then you also have 2 teams right behind you that it gives them a chance to move up too. Do you see that happening at all, or?
I think the Giants smoke that we saw earlier is smoke. At least that's what I've kind of landed on now. I just can't see them with what they're paying Daniel Jones. I think that GM and head coach are both on the hot seat there, and I don't know that the ownership group is ready to give them another lease and say, hey, we believe in you for another 2 or 3 years while you develop this guy. So I think there's a very real scenario that we're talking about someone falling to 11. We saw Will Levis last year fall all the way into the 2nd round. And I think there were really high betting odds that he was going to go in the top 5. So I think it's very possible. I don't want to hold my breath and hope that is the case. So that's where, again, obviously Kwesi is keeping an eye on the phone, seeing what's happening and keeping close tabs on where things are at. So I have under good faith. I'm assuming that they will move up should they need to in that scenario. But yeah, I mean, that would be the ideal situation, right? You land one of those top 4 guys at 11, and then you still have pick 23 to fill maybe a defensive tackle hole, which is one of the main areas we still see on the roster. Right now I'm having a hard time seeing that actually come to fruition.
Kev, are you okay with a trade up?
I mean, I agree with Pat. I think it's smoke season at its finest right now. So pretty much anything we've heard in the last month, we kind of have to just retrain our brains to go back to what we were talking about at least a month or more
Probably
previously,
January, December.
even before the combine. And that's essentially when smoke season starts. So like, yeah, I don't outside of the Broncos getting super desperate or the Raiders doing something Raiderish, I think that would be our only two relative threats. It all's going to come down to what New England does. And if we're throwing smoke out of the window, they're not, I think Washington's not going to pass up Daniels at 2. I think that's chalk, the first 2, Williams and then Daniels. And then it's just going to be up to us for what we think the difference between Drake May and JJ McCarthy, and then the fall off to the next tier of Penix and Nix is. And is it going to be worth that? Like Pat was saying, that first rounder next year, that's going to be the big sticking point. And Quasey's going to value that pick really high, and he's not going to want to budge until maybe draft night. He swallows his ego and goes, you know what? We really need Drake May. I don't want to have the chance of any of these other teams moving up and getting him.
And
I'm just
getting
gonna
fired.
Yeah, so essentially he's gonna risk more. I mean, we're gonna lose the trade on the draft calculators. We have no bargaining power. We signed Sam Darnold. We've came out and said what we need to say. Oh, we could totally roll this year with Darnold on a 1-year deal. No, that's just hearsay. And
I'm not very good at poker, but I think I would like to play poker with Quasi right now.
yeah, I mean, everyone knows what we're gonna try to do, which is move up and get a quarterback. It's just we don't know how much we're gonna have to give up and what it's gonna take, what team's gonna want to tango. I really like the Harbaugh story at 5. He's not gonna. It's it's so fascinating because I don't know if any time in history you've had a quarterback of a coach who's getting hired by a team who has a pick in the top where the quarterback's supposed to go. Like, that's in my brain. I can't think of any quarterback who's had a quarterback prospect getting drafted
Chance
the
to
first
draft
year.
him in the top 10. Yeah, right. The next year. That is bizarre.
Right. So like, just imagine they didn't have Herbert, or if they moved on from Herbert, hypothetically. Is he really sold on him as a prospect, or is he just saying all these things to give himself the best player available because he wants the top tackle to fall to him even more?
I mean, it can be both. I mean, I think
I think
Jim Harbaugh really does like JJ McCarthy, and I think a lot of NFL guys do. I think he's got good arm talent. I think he's a good athlete. I think he can command an offense and run offense and be a leader in a locker room. So I think a lot of people do
so.
like him.
Right. So let's say that let's say the top 3 quarterbacks go, right? Williams, Daniels, May goes 3rd to New England. They stick and pick rather than trade because they need a quarterback. Then you're looking at 4 with Marvin Harrison Jr. Likely they're going to have to be really persuaded and not take a generational talent there. I still think they could with Monty Ossenfort there, probably field some calls, but let's say they stick and pick. 5, I think, is that sweet spot there for McCarthy because it won't take as much to get up as 3 or 4 would. You're only jumping 6 spots, and we're hopping the Giants, whatever that would be. But Harbaugh, just if he's thinking, I don't know how much say he's going to have in the GM's ear, but he doesn't want
He's
the
got
guy he
influence.
loves the most to go to Denver in his division for the foreseeable future. So
Or Las Vegas.
right, so they're not going to listen to either of those teams. So whether that means we have to trade up with them to get that opportunity and for them to not even have a chance at McCarthy, I don't know. I feel like that makes too much sense. You give him 11, you give him 23. Hey, we'll take 5. Our guy's sitting right there. Boom. Everyone's happy. We didn't give up too much. Maybe we throw in a third rounder to sweeten the deal. I don't know.
So in that situation, you think the Chargers would take 11 and 23 and maybe a third next year, and we
That
keep the
would be a
25?
I think that would be more than fair on the trade calculator. I've looked at it a little bit in the past. I think 11 and 23 would get it done in a normal year, but we don't really have that much bargaining power. So
I'm worried about the QB tax. I mean, we always hear about the QB tax, and that's where again that 2025 first comes to play, and that's what I've been hearing a lot about. And again, I don't know if that's I've seen some really wild trades thrown out about like number 3 with multiple 3 first round picks and fans wanting Justin Jefferson included in that pick, which is
I mean,
one of the most absurd things I've ever read. But I don't know. I worry about that QB tax. That is a real thing. We saw what San Francisco had to pay to get up to get Trey Lance a few years back.
I do
That's
agree in
scary.
that is a thing in former years, and this year's quarterback class is supposedly the best we've had in years. But
since Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance, right?
right. I really think the teams that are needing the quarterbacks, however, they don't have that capability. So whether that's the Broncos still paying for Russ and having no draft capital, or the Giants still paying for Daniel Jones, and you can't afford to mortgage a first rounder next year plus this year and be paying $45 million on the book in dead cap, like that's you're triple and doubling down on whoever this quarterback is. And if he doesn't work out, everyone's fired, which I just can't see some of these teams that are quarterback needy really mortgaging the future for what it's going to take for a lot of them, like the Raiders, the Seahawks, even in mock drafts, they could be a surprise team that
Yeah,
could
I
try
think the
to hop up,
Seahawks.
but they don't. I mean, they have some draft picks, but they don't have what we have.
Right.
We have the 11th pick plus another first in this year's draft, which is a really good draft compared to next year's draft. So I know what Pat's saying with next year's first being a big thing, but I mean, worst case scenario, we're probably sitting at 11 next year with 6 wins, right? So, but if our if we have another bounce back year, we're picking in the 20s. So it's like, how much value does that pick have?
So this is a little different than the conversation we're having, but do you guys think that maybe pick number 3 might even be a trade destination for somebody who wanted Marvin Harrison Jr.? You
Yeah,
know, I mean, I think he's the best player in the draft. I mean, some people would argue it's Caleb Williams. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. He has probably the safest floor and I think probably the highest ceiling too. So when I look at him, I look at a future Hall of Famer. So I think it would make some sense that there are people calling New England at 3 trying to get him. You know, maybe the Chargers desperately need weapons. So maybe the
That's what I was
Chargers are trying to
thinking.
move up to get him. Or hell, even maybe the Bears are trying to move from 9 to get him. They just had him in for a meeting the other day. So maybe somebody's looking at 3 and maybe they're jacking the price up because you got the quarterback needy teams and you've got the Marvin Harrison Jr. needy teams. And they're just trying to, keep pushing that price up. I don't know.
I think that would make sense probably in a normal wide receiver class, but the way they're talking about all the top 3 guys, I don't think a team's going to want to mortgage a future first if they could just sit and pick Odunze or Neighbors. Like,
I don't
I,
know. I mean, I think
I can't see that happening.
I'm not an Adunze guy. Um, I think Neighbors is pretty good, but I think the difference between Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. is just, I think it's astronomical. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the closest thing we've seen to Randy Moss in 26 years or whatever.
Yeah, it's crazy how good he is, and the whole draft process is watering it down a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of like retrain our brain. Like that's what.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the end of the college football season, the college football playoff. Who are all these players that we were talking about and really excited about? And one name that I've been thinking about a lot, who nobody's talking about, Brock Bowers. Like,
Yeah.
I get he's a tight end. I get that tight ends don't get taken at elite spots because they grow off trees these days. There's a bunch of super tall, freakish, athletic guys. But this guy, what are they saying? He's the best tight end prospect since he's better than Kyle Pitts. I mean, name
He's more productive, yeah.
more.
I mean, you're
productive.
saying with the Hawkinson injury, you're saying we stick at 11 and we take Brock Bowers.
Well,
would
I mean,
be
if you were looking
epic.
at mocks up until free agency started, when the Chargers got rid of Mike Williams and then traded away Keenan Allen, I mean, Brock Bowers was the only pick that was mocked to the Chargers. So, I mean, Brock Bowers could be the guy at 5 too,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, when we're talking about teams that are trading up, I mean, it might not be somebody who's currently slotted at 8 or 7. If Bowers is sitting there, some team who's in the teens is going to see that and go, you know what? This could really elevate our team. So I think
Can
there's
you
a few of those
justify to your
players.
fans, though, moving up for a tight end?
I don't know.
I'm not saying he
I-
won't be great. I'm not saying he won't be Hall of Fame, but can you justify moving up into the top 10, top 8, top 5 to get a Brock Bowers when
It's the
last
same.
year we just saw Sam Laporta picked 64th overall?
Right, but it's
You
the
know?
same as your argument for Marv. I mean, it
No,
it's
wide
a
receiver is
unique
more of a
player.
premium position.
Okay, but Brock Bowers is not just a tight end. You're boxing him into just a position that he really doesn't play. He's an offensive weapon who gets split out wide.
I want to circle back to quarterback again.
Oh
The two
boy.
the two guys that we haven't talked about that are occasionally seen as first round picks, Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, and I think more so for Penix. I have a very big gap between my top 4 and those two guys. Now, if you were to tell me that the Vikings pick 23, whatever happened, I'm gonna stick behind whatever KOC and Kwesi decide to do. But I'm not gonna like it as much as any of those top 4 guys, especially if we're talking about pick 11. If we're sitting here and we're settling for QB5. So I'm just curious your guys' opinion on that next tier, in my opinion, of quarterbacks.
You want to go first, Kev, or do you want me to?
Yeah. So that would be I honestly think we're doing all this homework on all of these quarterbacks because we have to. It's because we put ourselves in this situation and we have the 11th pick. We don't have the 5th pick. We don't have the 4th pick right now. We don't know what's going to happen. Some team could call them and move up to 4, move up to 5, then 5 quarterbacks are gone, and we have no control over that because we don't own that pick. We're still at 11. So we have to treat this draft like we're at 11, and whoever falls to us is going to be who we're going to get. Or maybe we'll get lucky enough to move up to number 9. Who even has the 9th pick? I don't even know.
Bears.
I haven't done mock drafts in forever. Oh, the Bears won't trade with us. Jets could.
What do you mean? We've traded
Wow.
with every other team in the division.
Yeah, that's right. Kwesi doesn't care. Let him cook.
To your question, Pat, I guess I see it more of a top 3 with JJ McCarthy knocking on that door and Penix kind of just a step behind JJ McCarthy. And then I do see a bigger gap between Penix and Bo Nix, but kind of what we've been talking about, go back to what were your thoughts and feelings about these players in December and January. And when I first started looking into Michael Penix, I mean, the guy can sling the ball. He moves around in
Yeah.
the pocket pretty well. He's been wildly successful at Washington. He was pretty good at Indiana before that. He had the injuries and stuff, but I think I would be just fine with Michael Penix at 11. And that might be a little higher than what you guys think, but I'd be okay with him at 11. Bo Nix, on the other hand, I started out really liking Bo Nix. I've kind of pulled it back a little bit, but I'm kind of jumping back on board again. I don't necessarily want him at 11 because I don't think you have to take him at 11. But if they took a cornerback, if they took a defensive tackle at 11, and then they took Bo Nix at 23, I'd be okay with it. The problem is that taking Bo Nix at 23 and at the same time, taking Bo Nix at 23 by itself is fine. It doesn't bother me at all. Letting Kirk walk for nothing to take Bo Nix at 23, where I'm not sure that Bo Nix's ceiling is Kirk Cousins of 2023. That part kind of irks me a little bit. But Bo Nix by himself, I think, could be a pretty solid above average starting quarterback.
That would probably be the most toxic the fan base has ever been if that was the result at the end of draft night 1. It just you can't do that. You can't select another position at 11 and stick. One, we're not sticking, but we're hypothetically saying that right now. If you went and you took a corner at 11, Quinion Mitchell, and then
you don't know what happens the 10 picks ahead of you, though.
You don't know what happens the 10 picks after you. So it's like that's where the Seahawks, the Raiders, the Broncos, they're all sitting there waiting for whoever's fallen, and you're just going to let a quarterback go to any of those teams?
So say those
we're not going to do that.
Okay, so say
Penix and Nick are still on the board and
at 11.
Both at 11.
Do you then
take best player available?
Do you think both of them go between 11 and 23?
They would have to.
You think they for sure do?
No, but you can't risk that. If you've already risked this much in the offseason, I mean, you can't. What if a team later in the draft, what if the Dolphins want to move on from Tua? I've seen Penix go to Miami.
They've already got a left-handed offense, so yeah, that makes sense.
That'd be wild.
No, I kind of agree with you, Kev. I think that the Vikings, they really have kind of backed themselves into a corner by they have to take a quarterback at 11.
Or higher. I think we have to take one higher.
But yeah, at 11 at the very least. 11 at the very least.
Which sucks because you don't, like we just said, we don't want to Christian Ponder it. Fans are going to have flashbacks taking Christian Ponder at 11 when he wasn't even a first round talent.
Yeah. See, that's a different thing about, we're talking about giving up 3 first-round picks to go up and get the quarterback 4 in J.J. McCarthy. But everyone sees him as a first-round talent.
Yeah,
I think you're not just taking a guy to take a guy. You're taking a guy who most people see him as a value there or appropriate.
Right. I agree with you where I think I would be excited and appealed if we got McCarthy, whether that's anywhere between 11 and 5 or we sit at 11 and take him somehow, luckily. But I feel like once you get in that Penix, Nix, like Pat was saying, the tier drop off, it's just the injuries. I mean, I was listening to K-Fan today, and it's like, what if you just said that you were going to get 6 years? Why does every quarterback have to be a 15-year franchise guy? I feel like that's just hard to get in today's NFL. And sure, Mahomes is going to be that. Joe Burrow could be that. Josh Allen could be that. But can we just be happy with having like a really good possible Pro Bowler 2 years career quarterback for the next 6 years to keep
It's
JJ
what we
happy?
just had. What we just
Right.
had, and half the frickin' state hated him.
Right. So, I mean, it would be on a rookie
So you want
contract
to talk?
for 4 of
mean,
the years, 5 of the years with the first round option. So, I mean, we could be happy with. Imagine this is how I was picturing it
no,
in my
we
brain.
could. Us three could. But the rest of the
Imagine,
state,
okay, imagine this though. Michael Penix doesn't get drafted. He's just a free agent a month ago. And he's, how old is he? 23?
yeah, he will be.
23-year-old.
He will be 23.
Turning
Will be
24.
23.
Yeah.
He's just available, and we can sign him to a 4-year deal with an option, $8 million per or whatever the rookie deal is. You take that 20 out of 20 times if you can control the narrative around it, where once you tie a draft pick to that player and that person, it just changes the way you think about them, their expectations, and everything. But like, if you just told me that Michael Penix could come in, learn. I mean, he's still got to learn. He's not ready. People say his passing and everything, but I think he's a really good student of the game from what I've read. He could come in, learn under O'Connell really well, and I could convince myself in that. But like, it's when you put the price tag of whether it's moving up or like you said, taking an 11, where a lot of people have so many question marks on a guy like that with not one, not two, but like 3 big injuries in his history. If he doesn't pan out, that if he gets injured, that's the end for everybody.
Right.
So I think the other thing too, Tom, you mentioned Penix can sling it, and he certainly can. And I think some of the statistics show that as far as like a deep ball outside passer, he was one of, if not the best in college football this past season, if not longer than that. The questions that I have been reading about it, is more intermediate and middle of the field throws, which to me is even more concerning in a KOC offense where you do see a lot of those intermediate type routes too. So that's part of why I am a little bit unsure about Penix, at least in this particular offense. I also am admittedly biased against a lefty quarterback, if nothing else, just from aesthetics alone. So I will say that. I'd like to share just a couple stats that have kind of helped bump JJ McCarthy into that top 4, that first tier for me, over the last few weeks. The first being the weight gain. So I think a lot of people thought that he was playing at 195, maybe 200 for a lot of the season. And that's just not where you want to be. Jaden Daniels, obviously in that same range, but Jaden Daniels is a completely different athlete than JJ McCarthy. But bulked up to 219 at the combine. He didn't run a 40 time, so we don't know what his like kind of straight line speed was. But from a 3-cone drill, and don't fact check me on this, but I believe it was the 7th fastest of all players at the combine, and the fastest of any quarterback prospect in the last 5 years. So I think that some of that athleticism is not been completely unveiled in the Michigan offense, which is my other part that I really do enjoy. JJ McCarthy, is he the youngest quarterback in this class? If not one of the youngest?
I think he is the youngest. He hasn't turned 21 yet, right?
20-year-old. So the youngest quarterback in this class who ran a pro style offense in college, which is, again, not something you can say for Penix, not something you can say for Bo Nix. So if you're talking age wise, and Kev, like you mentioned, not every team is going to have that 15-year guy. So McCarthy's already 3 years younger than that next tier in my opinion. And he ran a more pro style ready offense already in college. So again, just a couple things that have kind of bumped McCarthy up a little bit in my rankings. And then again, the last one, I believe I shared this with you guys over text, but his throwing on the run percentage only dropped by, I believe it was 1%. It went from 72% completion on all throws to 71% of his throws while on the run, which is just a really remarkable stat for somebody who's going to be moving, getting outside the pocket. I think that would be a huge benefit to this offense as well.
Yeah, but he had a short sample size or a small sample size. He had the best running game in the nation, best offensive line. So I mean, anybody
100%.
could have done that, right?
Well, I don't know about anybody. I couldn't, but I'm sure there are some
Kev
other.
could have.
No, not even close. So I love how in depth we're getting on the quarterbacks specifically, and even when it gets closer to the draft, I'm gonna force myself to open myself to all kinds of options because I'm just a delusional Vikings fan, like we all are. But it's like, at what point is it too much, and we should just focus on what we can control? I don't know. I read an interesting article. It was an interview Chip Scoggins did with the defensive coordinator Rossi for the Gophers, who faced both Drake May and JJ McCarthy. So kind of when comparing those two, a little bit of a separator when it comes to what we want. He alluded to, I guess, depending on what the Vikings want in their next quarterback, McCarthy would be perfect if we want to do a lot of play action, similar to what Pat said, run the ball, a lot of RPO type stuff that he's comfortable doing. Um, I still think McCarthy does have the ability to develop more as a quarterback and more of the, prospect that he was coming into Michigan, where you can just drop back and sling it and win you games. But if you're just talking X's and O's, comparing the two right now, I think Drake May is more so the option that our coaching staff would lean towards based on the fact that he can just drop back and sling it. And you can say, go win us the game, 2-minute drill, fourth quarter. It's been more proven with him, but he also has the tools on display ready at his disposal. Obviously, they both need developing. And I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so disappointed we didn't get May when he goes third to the Patriots. But I'll always kind of be like wondering what if Josh McCown and KOC got their hands on a guy that he used to coach in high school.
I think the name we all hear with Drake May is Justin Herbert, right? It's a big guy, hand and arm, underrated.
Josh
athlete.
Allen too.
Josh Allen, I've heard a lot of. I mean, that's the prototypical.
Actually,
quarterback that you wanna
somebody compared him to Andrew Luck the other day.
see. Interesting. I haven't heard that one yet.
Can't remember who it was.
They are similar, though, where when Luck used to pull it down, Luck was sneaky,
Yeah.
sneaky when he would run it, and he'd be smart with the ball too. I remember Drake May a couple plays against the Gophers. He got hit pretty good, and the coaches wouldn't yell at him on the sideline like, "Hey, get out of bounds, get down." But yeah, he's an athlete.
He is. I think the other thing, and one of the biggest knocks is his production was down this year compared to his prior season. But I believe there was a lot of talent that North Carolina roster was pretty depleted. And as you go back and look, he was running for his life behind that offensive line for a good chunk of last season too. So I don't think that's completely fair. Tom, as you were alluding to, that Michigan roster was clearly stacked, and McCarthy had a lot of help surrounding him. I don't think that that North Carolina roster was completely void of talent, but I think that there was a pretty big difference in terms of May needing to rely specifically on his own arm talent to make a lot of things happen this past season as well.
Yeah, and kind of what you alluded to the name that he gets compared to a lot is Justin Herbert. Well, The same thing kind of happened to Justin Herbert at Oregon, right? His second to last season, he was projected to be the number 1 pick. Like everyone said, it was a sure thing. And then his last year at Oregon, it was a little down. I think they had lost a couple receivers here and there, and he just didn't have as good of a season. So he falls a few picks. Doesn't fall far, but he falls a few picks in the NFL draft. But it turns out everybody was right the first time about him as a talent and him as a quarterback. So, we shouldn't really be holding his Drake May's last season against him as much as, some people have been.
Yeah, it's kind of just retrain your brain to think about the prospect coming in and, the steam even before this season of college football. It was Caleb Williams and Drake May. That was all the mocks.
Right.
And I mean, Drake May didn't exactly overperform, but he didn't underperform either. I mean, he still had a pretty solid season. Obviously, like you mentioned, a lot less talent. Didn't have Josh Downs to throw the ball to. I just think he has the tools that we need, and we can definitely utilize that the best. I'd be comfortable with him or McCarthy, like we've said. But if I had to choose, I'm a Drake May guy. I just think he has the highest ceiling. He's got everything you want, and if you can just mold that into the player you want, we actually have a chance. And if you have a chance to get a guy like that, and let's say you do think there's a big difference between the 3 and the 4, it's like, why not? Why not move up and go and get that?
Do you think that what do you think the chances are that the Vikings trade to 3 or 4 percentage wise? Like what?
I don't know. It's hard to put a number on it.
Just completely
35, 40.
I'm thinking 60. Like I think there's a really, really good chance. And I think part of why I'm basing that is obviously there's a ton of steam, but we heard how aggressively the Vikings were last year in trying to get up to trade for Anthony Richardson. So that was with Kirk on the roster. We don't have Kirk on the roster anymore. Our backs are against the wall, and we've already talked about this, but I think that they are going to make it happen. And to me, and Kev, I know you said that you think Jaden is a lock at number 2. I'm not as sure as that. I think there's a little bit of smoke that could be there. I think it
JJ McCarthy smoke.
No. I actually have heard
because
that too.
I mean, yeah, that's the other name. It's not Drake May that I've heard it too. It's JJ McCarthy.
I've heard JJ McCarthy smoke too. So I'm not as certain that Jaden is going to go number 2, and he very well could. But yeah, I think that's
What
going
if
to
they
be
just lock down left tackle at number 2 overall and say, we got to build this from the trenches?
Like a Marius Mims and call it a day.
So in the scenario where Jaden Daniels does fall, let's say we go 1, 2, 3, whatever order. McCarthy makes the jump into the top 3. May ends up going in the top 3. What are you guys' thoughts on Jaden Daniels? We haven't touched on him a whole lot.
I haven't even prepared myself mentally for Jaden Daniels, and that's kind of a mistake on my end. But it's kind of like you just don't.
You've kind of put Caleb and Jaden McDaniels, and you've just kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Pretty much. I mean, if it happens, I'll be really happy and I'll be really surprised. But I don't want to mentally prepare myself for something that is not likely.
I'd be pretty pumped. I mean, McDaniels, another guy, can sling the ball. He's accurate on his deep balls. He's got a big arm. Obviously, he's a great athlete. The two things I think we talked about.
He can't shoot a 3, though. He cannot shoot a 3.
Did I say McDaniels? Did I say McDaniels?
It's all right. I do that all the time. That's also why I don't want him on the Vikings, because my brain would just be all super messed up.
He can defend all 5 positions. No, he
punches too many walls.
Like you said, Pat, he's a $195 or 205, whatever he is. and he does not slide. So he needs to put on 15 pounds of weight, and he needs to take care of his body. So he needs to start stepping out of bounds more, and he needs to slide more. Outside of that, I'm down. You can do a lot with that guy.
Well, and the reason why it's been almost too quiet on the Vikings front with Jaden Daniels. I think part of that could be that there's a lot of steam that he is locked in at number 2. But there was some talk about after the LSU Pro Day, Josh McCown was supposed to meet with them. That meeting didn't happen. The Vikings have not formally connected with him or put him through a private workout. Again, talking about steam, is that a little bit too quiet at that point that the Vikings haven't? Because um, Doogie has reported that there has been a lot of interest on the Jaden Daniels camp in terms of playing for the Vikings. And again, we've talked about this is a great system, great setup for any young quarterback to come in here.
If only it worked like that.
Justin Jefferson also reportedly has a relationship with Jaden too, and that apparently would make Justin Jefferson a pretty happy camper if we brought in his fellow LSU alum too. So just another I don't see it happening, but
I mean, the draft is weird that way, right? I mean, I think we've all heard that story that Rick Spielman talked about Harrison Smith a few weeks ago, how or maybe it was Harrison Smith was talking, I can't remember who, but the Vikings didn't talk to Harrison Smith at all throughout the whole entire process. Harrison had no clue the Vikings were interested in him until he got the phone call saying, "Hey, we're going to take you at, was it pick 30 or 31 or whatever."
Right, and maybe that's the best way to do it.
Maybe.
But I feel like when you have a decision this important, there has to be at least a little something. You can't just go in blind.
I mean, there could be some
communication.
Behind the scenes. Yeah, but there's no formal meetings and sit downs, I guess.
I know. Well, I thought about this. I'm just drawing up conspiracy theories. But what if Drake May is just like going to release something like draft week, like just ripping a J? Just some Trump tweets from the past, just like hardcore racist. Oh yeah, we saw the we talked about that, I think, in the group chat the other week, where he doesn't follow any of the black quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah.
It's only the white quarterbacks. So yeah, we just got to start leaking stuff on Daniels or May and let the chips fall where they may. Oh, you see what I did there?
Oh boy.
Dang. I didn't even plan that. That was cool.
Okay, I got shifting away from the quarterbacks a little bit.
No, I had one more thing on quarterbacks.
Oh, okay.
So do you guys buy into the theory that some schools just can never have good quarterbacks in the NFL?
I did until last year.
Right. Ohio State,
yeah.
I didn't buy into CJ Stroud. I couldn't convince myself.
No.
I said he's really freaking good in college. I know he's really good in college, but I'm like, he can't read a defense. He's just out there throwing amazing wide receivers, the best wide receivers in the world.
Which he was.
In history. Which he was, and he proved me way wrong on that. So now I'm opening my end of the thing that Tar Heel quarterbacks, Trubisky, Sam Howell.
Hey, I'm a big Sam Howell guy. Washington did him dirty, man.
Why did they trade him? Because they don't want to have a crowded
I read something the other day that apparently Sam Howell has a very alpha personality, and they were worried about who they bring in at number 2 and not having the support from the guy that is going to be competing with them. And it wasn't necessarily not being supportive, but like he was just going to give this.
They were worried he was going to take the job.
Well, literally, imagine if they took Drake May at 2 and had Sam Howell. Sam Howell started over him for the 2 years that Drake May was at the Tar Heels.
I think crazy. I'm with Tom though. I think Sam Howell he was a 4th round pick, right? Like undersized, not a good
He was a
athlete, not a
he
great
was a
athlete.
first round rumored pick or
He
like
was.
the
He
top
was.
The
quarterback
year before
the year
he
before.
the year
Right.
before he was he declared he was projected top 10.
I agree. Yeah. I don't know.
I think for what he did in Washington with that team, that was
A
impressive to
coaching
me.
staff. I mean,
Yeah, I mean that was a
sorry, but
dumpster
Eric
fire.
Bieniemy is not a good coach, and neither is Ron Rivera. They're not good coaches anymore. I
Do
don't
you
that
know
Bieniemy
Marcus
ever was.
Mariota's wearing number 0? Another X nugget. All right, we can move over from quarterbacks now. But I just thought I'd get your guys' opinion on that because I still believe that a little bit in my brain, like the Oregon quarterback, like
It's
Joey Harrington.
name. Yeah, I mean, has there ever been a Washington quarterback who's been anything in the NFL? Not that it matters, but it's an air raid offense.
what do I say? Scout the player, not the helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Justin Herbert has been pretty good from Oregon. So
Has there ever been a good Michigan quarterback? They all stink.
Okay. Wouldn't it actually make a lot of sense for New England to just take JJ McCarthy at 3? Like,
I don't know.
we just lost
I haven't seen that once.
We just lost a Michigan quarterback who was kind of a game manager, had a good head on his shoulders, was a great leader, was a winner, did whatever that team needed to win.
You know who else won a national championship and they took in the top? Mac Jones.
I don't think Mac Jones
He
is
was
the
a
prospect
winner.
that JJ McCarthy is, but
I'm just saying, I get similar vibes.
Yeah.
I think that the trade down steam, that roster is not good. That roster is not good. Jared Mayo, you got a defensive minded head coach in place. Obviously, you have the same in Washington, but they did bring in Cliff Kingsbury to help kind of design that offense and run that system. I think that would be the worst scenario for any young quarterback to go through. So I kind of think that they would be smart in listening to any offers in terms of trading down. But I do think it does I mean, you're in the top 3.
Yeah.
You can make something happen.
Or we can have another conspiracy metal tin hat here. Have Drake May leak to the Patriots and Elliott Wolf there in the front office. It's his first year there as a GM. Have him leak. If you take me at 3, I'm not coming in there to ruin my career. I'm not doing that. So you take this pick right here. You trade it.
Pull an
Minnesota, because I want to go to Minnesota. You trade that. You take the 11 and the 23. Nothing else.
I mean, I know we haven't had the public Eli in a very long time, but you know that there's some stuff going on in these agencies where they know where their players want to go and they shifted a certain direction for sure.
There's a Scott Boras somewhere in the NFL that's
Yeah.
pulling the puppet strings. All right, one more quarterback nugget, and then we can wrap things up. So, Rick Spielman, I know you guys probably saw what he said. He thinks that we have our hands tied, like we just said, and he thinks we're going to trade up to number 4, and we're going to get J.J. McCarthy. Why would he say that? One, he could just be talking because that's his job to talk these days. But we have a lot of similar scouts. Same one that Spielman had. Jamal Stevenson, still around. Somebody has to know something. Why would he just say that randomly? And do we think he knows something we don't?
I think that particular episode of, because he's on a podcast with Ryan Wilson now. And so that particular episode was literally 20 minutes dedicated to the Vikings draft. And they do that for every single team, or they've done it for a lot of teams. So do I think he do I think he was hearing something and he just randomly spouted that out to be a talking point, or a mouthpiece for some of these teams? No, I don't think that. Does he maybe have a little insight? Yeah, maybe. But I think specifically it was that 20-minute episode was based on a mock draft specifically for the Vikings.
That's so funny to have Rick Spielman do a mock draft specifically for the Vikings.
Dude,
Well, they do it
If
for
you
every
still
team.
had your job, what would you do, Rick?
he would have given Kirk a 5-year, $200 million guaranteed contract.
No, he would have traded down out of the first round completely, gathered as many picks as possible. That
So
was my
I'm gonna-
last quarterback piece.
I know I mentioned this briefly before, but Vikings Twitter right now is littered with different reporters or people who have inside scoops. We got Shredder Vikes, Skull Bros, and the latest of the bunch has been Crack Rock, who is a NFL owner insider who has also claimed that the magic play is the Vikings trading up to number 4. Is either number 4 or number 5, but Crack Rock apparently has sources and connects with the owners of agencies and said that JJ McCarthy is the guy that they are hoping to create the JJ to JJ connection with. Now Shredder Vikes, on the other hand, I believe has came out and said that Drake May is their guy. So we have a little bit of a face off, and maybe Crack Rock didn't know that the trading up into the top 3 to get Drake May was a possibility at that time, but it's just a really weird time in Vikings Twitter and reporting season right now.
It's fun. I mean, this is probably about as fun as the Jim Harbaugh stuff in 22. Like,
that was a wild.
that was
time.
wild.
We thought it was a done deal. I was excited. Everyone
Wasn't
was
it
excited.
until one of the other minority owners went off on Harbaugh about something?
I just think nobody really knows anything with this new front office yet. So it's just kind of too early to tell. I don't know. Anybody can have an inkling, but
Okay, moving on from the quarterbacks. What is the next biggest need?
I think it's defensive tackle. I think that, to me, is the last player. I feel like we made so many solid additions to the defensive front, and to me, these additions that we made were Flores guys, like guys that he's bringing in to fit this system, not the guys that were leftovers from Rick. These are guys that he thinks will fit. We got pass rushers and guys who can defend the run, which is something that we haven't seen in this defense in at least a couple of years here. So I think defensive tackle is still a huge need. If we could find someone who could put a little bit of pressure on the quarterback too, I think that would be fantastic. But cornerback is right there. I think it's no secret that that we are lacking depth in the cornerback position as well. But to me, the defensive tackle is kind of the biggest glaring need. But also, can you have enough pass rushers? So I think we need a lot of help, basically anywhere but safety and inside linebacker. I think right now,
Yeah.
but I think defensive tackle is the biggest hole right now on defense.
yeah, free agency kind of helped us get clarity a little bit if you talked to us a month plus, we were like, oh man, we need a lot. We had like 3 guys returning on defense. It's like, we have nobody under contract past this next year. It's like, we got to start building for the future here at a lot of key positions. And now I think it's been answered for a little bit. We still need youth and we need depth because injuries happen and we see what happens when that happens. And we're screwed a lot of the times at key positions. So, yeah, I would say if you can just get Flores a defensive difference maker, doesn't matter what position. I think he can kind of figure out positionless football, put him everywhere, put him anywhere.
S-
But anywhere along that defensive line, I think if you just give him a big athletic dude who can move around, I really like
say
our
you
flexibility with that.
say the whole quarterback stuff kind of falls apart. We can't trade into the top 5 or whatever. So we're
Sell the team. Sell the team.
sitting at 11. We're like we kind of talked about earlier. You're backed into a corner. You have to take, we'll say Michael Penix at 11. And then you take Byron Murphy or maybe that Latu from UCLA at 23 or a cornerback at 23. Which
Yeah.
there's like a handful of really good first round cornerbacks. Is
Right.
that a successful draft? Are you happy about that? Are you a little disappointed because all the hype about moving up into the top 5, which is super sexy, but a play like that might be something that's better for the team.
Right. I think I don't know, we would have to really convince ourselves on that one, I think. Just like we talked about that earlier, there's certain scenarios that just don't get you super excited, just because of what we're expecting. But yeah, if you're able to kill two birds with one stone and just, I don't, the odds that we sit and pick at 11 and 23 are probably like 10%, to be honest. Like, it's super low.
Maybe.
I could see us moving. What if we stuck and pick at 11 and then moved out of the first round completely? We don't have a second round pick. Quasi definitely wants one.
I mean, he just gave
loves
it
the
up.
second round picks. Look at what he's done with all of our great second round picks. Andrew Booth Jr., Ed Ingram,
TJ Hawkinson last year.
Yeah. So I mean,
Well, I mean, he just traded away that second round pick. So wouldn't that be weird to give up 2 second round picks to move in and then
he wasn't the one who came up with the idea in the first place. So it just gives us more options, more flexibility with the draft to have 2 first rounders here, but we could easily pick up a second round pick if we drop out of the first round at the end there. And that would be sweet.
All depends on who's there, but yeah.
Or if we move down from, well, it all depends on our board, I guess. The Vikings board, not my board. But like, if we have 25 for sure guys, and 3 of them are still there, and then we think there's a drop off in that tier, then
I think this is a really deep draft for a lot of positions.
Right.
Like,
so I think
in the first round,
20,
I think there's probably 5 or 6 receivers that are well worth a first round pick. Same thing with offensive tackles. Same thing with I think there's a handful of pass rushers that are worth first round picks. The cornerbacks we've already mentioned. Like, there's a lot of good players between, say, pick 15 and even 60. And then there's some guys in the 4th and 5th round. I think would be really good values on day 2 and day 3 and things like that. But
I'm super excited for our 5th round wide receiver draft pick.
Hey, you know what? That's the other thing.
I gotta start doing deep dives on those guys.
We need a receiver. We need a wide receiver 3.
Yep, Powell. We brought him back.
We brought him back, and he's kind of a nice, side piece, but he's not a consistent wide receiver 3 by any means.
He's not someone you want to bring home to the family. He's more of the Thursday night side piece.
Yeah, he's a side piece.
I think there's, again, we've talked about how well this team is set up for a young quarterback, but we could use 2 interior offensive linemen. I think Bradbury's a question mark. I think Ingram was better last year, but I don't think that he was good. And then now Blake Brandel is penciled in at the starting left guard right now. That's
that's weird.
Question mark? Yeah, it's weird. I hope it works out. They gave him starter-esque money.
I think
So I think
everybody's a question mark. You're right on with that, Pat. I
that's
mean,
yeah.
nobody's a sure thing, especially with all these like June 2 cap hits that are, there's certain stipulations in contracts that we have to wait until a certain day to cut somebody. Like, there could be still some more surprise moves to free up some space. So it's like anything could happen, any position. We're not penciled in to take anyone, but yeah, we say the same things every year, I feel like.
So
You
then
need
Jackson Powers Johnson at 23. Is that what you're saying, Pat?
I'm
JPJ?
saying I to get back to your first question, I will not be it unless if they don't trade up to get one of these guys. To me, that means that something didn't work out. They're not getting to me, that's a settling thing. They're settling for whoever's falling. Now, if there's a scenario where Jaden Daniels or Drake May or JJ McCarthy falls to 11 and we can get Cooper DeJean or Newton from Illinois, one of those guys at 23, I would be the happiest person in the entire world.
Yeah.
I just think that things as they sit today, I don't feel like that's going to happen. And I think, Kev, you talked about it earlier. I think that they're going to make a trade up, whether it's up to pick 9 or pick 8 or whatever it is. I don't think they're going to pick at 11 because I think that they're going to need to make a move up to get whatever quarterback that they need in that scenario. Now, if there's any situation like where that happens and one of those guys falls to 7, 8, 9, and we think that we can get up and get that guy without
That's
giving
the
up
best case
pick
scenario.
23.
Yep.
I mean, that would be incredible. And I don't know what that is because you don't have a number 2 next year. So you'd have to, I don't know. That's a weird trade to happen.
We should do that week of the draft. Let's do a podcast specifically to best draft night scenarios.
Yeah.
And I think that one would be it realistically, just because we know we're not sticking at 11 with how much pressure is on this front office and the future at that position. Yeah, I think moving up to like 7 or 8 would be perfect. And it wouldn't take that much.
If it was just a future first and maybe a 4th this year or a 3rd next year, I mean, I'd be okay with if you ended up with JJ McCarthy at the worst and you had no picks in the first 2 days next year, I'd be okay with that. And you kept 23 this year. Then that's a steal. That's
because
really good
then
value.
let's say you get your quarterback, whether that is the top 10 pick, right? You have 23. You can still move out of the first round completely. You got that pick as, insurance and flexibility. Turns out we didn't need it to move up at all. We still have that pick. You either take best player available, like we said, defensive guy, cornerback, D-line, edge rusher, and that's a really cool piece to have, or you move out completely, get those picks back that we got rid of, and boom, it's a normal draft. You get your quarterback of the future, plus you still have all your picks. That would be ideal.
Like, I'd almost rather, I know it's kind of short-sighted of me, but I'd almost rather give up 25, 26 and a 2nd round pick in 27 or something like that than give up 23. Like, I really wish we didn't have to give up 23 this year.
Can I bring up something that we haven't discussed yet? And that it would be including a current player on the roster in a trade up scenario
here we
rather
go.
than draft value.
Like, what name are you thinking?
I think to me the most logical, and I don't like it, so please don't crucify me for this, but Christian Darrisaw to me is the most likely trade candidate. Again, you're talking about a guy who is up, and I don't want to trade our starting left tackle, but
And then
he's gonna be
draft
due
a
for
rookie
contract.
quarterback.
He's going to get paid. We saw last year the DJ Moore inclusion in the trade for Carolina to get up to get Bryce Young. would that be something that the two of you would entertain? Weakening the roster now to hopefully, again, continue to build out in the future?
No. You want to make
Should have kept Ezra. If that was the
Yeah.
case, should have kept Ezra, kicked him out to left tackle.
Dersaw's very good. And Brian O'Neill,
He's
I
solid.
like him. He's still pretty solid, but he's slipping. You can't afford to lose any offensive line help for this new rookie quarterback if we expect him to be successful. So
Yeah,
no, not
I agree.
if you want to
I
talk
would
to
be
somebody else,
pretty sad.
Maybe somebody else, but not you can't get rid of Darisaw.
Our O line has been not just average, but we've been like good the last 3 years, and that's included with Bradbury and frickin' Ed Ingram the last 2 years. Like, if we can get by with what we have now and make it better ever, like,
I agree.
I'm all for it. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So
What if,
You know,
okay,
don't mess with it.
another out there one. What if Jordan Addison's name comes up in a potential
Oh,
trade?
man.
If you're talking pick 11 and Jordan Addison to get you to pick 4, Arizona is completely void of receiver talent right now, right? And in order to pass on Marvin Harrison Jr., you need to get something in return. Is that something that you would consider to land your quarterback in the future, knowing that you then possibly keep pick 23 in that scenario, or maybe it's next year's 2025 first round pick? Because I think we can all agree that Jordan Addison just had a wildly underrated rookie season, double-digit touchdowns, 900 yards, but he is the number 2 receiver here. Is that a name you would consider in a potential inclusion?
If Arizona offered that to us, if they asked for 11 and Jordan Addison, I wouldn't even let them finish because I'd say yes. Because I don't think that Arizona would ever offer that because they have the pick 27 as well. So
That's true.
if they want a receiver, they can get Marvin Harrison or they can get somebody later on in the first round as well. So, but yeah, I would accept that in a heartbeat because then I would just take another receiver at 23, like a Brian Thomas or something, or Ladd
Yeah.
McConkey.
I think there is positions that some teams, maybe not the Vikings, will try to move out of guys that are due big money contracts just because of, like you said, the draft class is really deep at certain positions, whether that's wide receiver, but I've heard offensive tackle too. So it wouldn't surprise me, like Pat was saying, not that I want it to happen, but Brian O'Neill is a huge cap hit. We already saw Kirk go out the door. He's good buddies with Kirk. I'd be really sad about it. That one would make more sense. Don't think we could get as much back for him, maybe like a 3rd round pick. But
Do
that
you think
would
we
be
get
an
a third for
option.
Brian O'Neill?
It wouldn't be anything more than that, especially with the
I think we'd be
injury
lucky to
history.
get a 3rd round pick.
I guess a 3rd day pick.
Yeah, I'd say 5th.
Yeah, so I don't see any reason why we would do that with him. And then, like Pat said, with Darisaw, it's sure, but then I want to tackle this year. That's a top 5 tackle.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, so
You can't
Darisaw's
just
already a top
remove him.
5 tackle. So then you're just looking for another top 5 tackle where Jordan Addison, super good. He could be a top 15 receiver. He's not right now. I mean, he's super good. He's a good complementary piece to Jefferson, but he's way easier to replace than Darisaw.
I don't really see us having many more like expendable players that other teams would desire, to be honest.
It's
a short list.
These trades, like draft day trades, including players, are so hard because teams don't have the pickings of free agents where you could just go say, hey, I'm going to trade my wide receiver 2 I'm going to sign this guy who's more of a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 depth position, because the free agent pool right now is not incredibly enticing for a lot of people right now. So I think that's very, very far fetched. But again, we have seen inclusion of players in the last year, so something to at least think about for sure.
Did you guys see the clickbait about Denver trading 12 Patrick Surtain and was it another first round pick next year
Yeah.
for
They
for
don't
3 or
have
4?
many picks, but yeah, I did
Like, that
see
was
that
nuts.
rumored trade. They
I
would
wouldn't
have
do
to
that.
do that. They would have to do that if they want to move up. That's what they're saying. So when you don't have draft equity, high picks, you got to move top elite players.
Are
I
they
wouldn't do that
still?
if I was them, but
Do they still owe any capital from the Russ trade, or is that all?
Isn't it 2 more years?
Is it 2 more
Russ,
years?
they're paying Russ for sure this year because he
Oh,
signed
I
that.
meant for draft picks. Do they are they
draft
void
picks.
of any draft picks? Yeah, still, or have those all been used?
I guess I'd have to. I think they've all been used.
Yeah,
I think it was just 2 years of draft picks.
yeah, I thought so too.
well, they gave up a pick for Sean Payton as well, did they not?
They might have.
They did.
Well, they have their first this year. Yep, they don't have a second. So they have a third, a fourth, 3 fifths, 2 sixths. So they're just lacking. I think next year. Let me look. 2025.
Kev, after this, can you look and see what draft capital the Rams have? I think that is a very sneaky. I mean, I know they
got Stetson Bennett, man.
Is he even
The
on the
future.
roster anymore? But I think
I
that's
don't
a
know.
sneaky quarterback landing spot.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was thinking about that the other day too.
Okay, so they traded this year's second for Sean Payton. What did they give up for Russ then?
That Russ trade was like 3 years ago, wasn't it? It was 21 or 22. Was it 22?
This was his second year.
Yeah, so 22 was his first year, 23 was his second. So they gave up 2 first-round picks, which ended up being Witherspoon, that cornerback from Illinois last year, and then I think it was Charles Cross the year before.
Yeah.
Oh, they traded Bradley Chubb, and they got a 4th-round pick this year. Woohoo! Aren't they glad they did that?
They only got a 4th-round pick for.
Yeah, I know. NFL trades are so dumb. You think this young player who's about to break out just value something of a day 1 or day 2 pick? Nope. All right. So they have their own picks next year. Every single pick, except for a 5th rounder, it looks like.
Boy, George Payton has been pretty aggressive over there since he took over.
I'm surprised he still has a job.
I kind of am too. And I wouldn't have guessed that coming from Spielman. Like Spielman was aggressive to a degree. You know, they went out and got Jared Allen and things like that. But like,
yeah, he was not very aggressive compared to
not compared to what George Payton's doing.
Well,
he's selling the farm for Russ.
Quasey's way different. That's why I'm
Sean Payton.
I remember saying that like when we first got Quasey. I'm like, it's the first year we have no idea what's going to happen. It's kind of fun, but nerve-wracking.
I wonder if the George Payton stuff is maybe even a little more him being a little afraid to take swings on this unproven talent. Because I mean, that's kind of Rick took his swing with Ponder, and we all saw how that worked out. But we talked about what would have happened if Rick had kept his job. He would have brought in rumored Doug Peterson, bringing in a retread head coach rather than a new kind of young guy. And we're seeing that kind of play out in Denver with the Russ acquisition, a guy who's a proven quarterback in the league, and bringing Sean Payton out. So it's to me, it's taking big swings, but almost swings that are a little bit less risky than taking swings in the draft, which is kind of what we're seeing now in this new Minnesota front office.
But they're just as costly.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, Quasey has to hit this draft, otherwise, man, he just, like we said, Spielman wasn't that good of a drafter either, but he hit on enough to keep us quiet and keep his job, and that's what Quasey needs to do too. I mean, sure, you can't hit on all of them, but like,
And
I mean, when
you
Rick
can't
hit,
win.
he hit.
You
Yeah.
can't win in this league. Look at the Chiefs. Like, they had so many guys on rookie contracts on their 2 Super Bowl teams. Like,
I
They also
think
have the
that
best quarterback and head coach duo. They've got
oh, I agree, but they
probably
wouldn't
one of the
have
best
won it
defensive
all.
coordinators of all time, is Steve Spagnuolo.
I think that what Rick did well was hitting on those day 2, day 3 picks every once in a while, because Rick had some stinkers too, like some really bad picks. But when you hit on a Stephon Diggs, when you hit on a Daniil Hunter, those guys that are
David Yankee.
And that's funny. I was thinking about David Yankee right before
No,
you
you
said
were
him. Yeah,
no,
I
you were
was.
not. Shut up.
but that I mean
Willie
that's why
Beavers.
that's why you keep your job is when you hit on those he paid his guys and built these strong rosters, and then he'd hit on the occasional 5th, 6th rounder that would be a huge difference maker, and that's what we need to see out of this.
Moritz Boehringer.
Yeah.
We're
I
going
think
to
that
do a
was
whole
Zim's guy.
episode. All right, let's plan this out before we wrap things up here. Before the draft, I want to do ghosts of Vikings draft past, and then I want to do like our plan for this year's draft. So that way we'll kind of hit a little bit of the past and some fun name drops and all of that, and then we'll do a little preview for what we hope to happen.
That sounds fun.
Like,
Hey,
Yeah.
Pat.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for listening in, guys. We enjoyed it, and hope you guys had some fun listening to it. If we can relate to a lot of the thoughts where everybody's just super bored this time of year, we'll wrap this show up, and we will be hopefully recording a lot more soon.
I got 'em.